Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am so excited and geeking out to be able to be speaking with LeVar Burton today. Hi, LeVar. How are you today?
I'm pretty well, Cassidy. How about yourself?
Oh, I am great and very excited to be here. For those who don't know, would be surprising, but you never know, LeVar is an actor, director, producer. He's the owner of LeVar Burton Entertainment. I think he's in the running to be the next host of Jeopardy. I don't know if that's real, but I want it to be. Um, and it is just so exciting to be able to talk with you after being a member of a Reading Rainbow household for so many
Mm,
years,
I love that about you, Cassidy. Are you still reading today?
all the time.
All the time. All right. Any
Yeah.
favorites that you want to share with us?
Oh, I've been on a sci-fi kick lately.
That's my favorite genre.
It's so great. I usually kind of hover between sci-fi and fantasy, and then I
hmm
sometimes
hmm
go into some nonfiction. But right now I'm
hmm
on my sci-fi kick.
Awesome. Awesome. Have you read any Octavia Butler?
Yes,
Yay. All right.
so good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. So what do you
Yeah,
want to talk
we're on
about?
a we're on a good roll already. So I do want to talk to you about not just reading, but just stories in general, because you
Mm.
call yourself a storyteller, and at the start of your career till now, technology has really changed the way that we tell stories in a lot of different ways. In your opinion, what has changed the most? What parts of stories have stayed the same?
Um, there's a lot about stories and storytelling that has remained the same, and you're absolutely right. There is a lot that has changed. I think that the part that is different than it has always been is the democratization of content creation. What
Mm,
I mean by that is that the barrier to entry is so low these days for anyone who has a story, and I believe that everyone has a story to tell. And if you've got a phone, right, then you have within your hand the right tool for the job to tell a cohesive story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, with characters that are compelling, those elements that have always been a part of good storytelling. And you have an opportunity to find an audience because the distribution is there as well. So we have never in the history of humankind been at a point when the tools of storytelling, professional grade storytelling, were so accessible to so many. And of course, the the rules of storytelling, those elements of storytelling that remain constant, those are always good to include in your stories: the beginning, the middle, and the end, the compelling characters, right? You always want that to be a part of whatever story you're telling.
yeah, absolutely. And you've spent a lot of time in your career encouraging others to shape their own story
Hmm.
by tapping into their imaginations and your efforts with Reading Rainbow, with the role you played on Star Trek, and more. Why is that important to you?
I think that our imaginations, I think of them as this superpower that human beings possess. Okay,
Mm,
because everything that you can think of began originally as a thought in the mind of some person, somebody, right? I think about Star Trek a lot in this conversation because I know that there was some kid who grew up watching the original series like I did, and that kid saw all of those scenes of Kirk reaching to the that velcroed place on his hip, because there are no pockets in the future. I can tell you
of
that
course.
because I've been there. I know. And so Kirk pulls out the communicator, he flips it open, he calls the ship, Scotty, can you beam me up? Right. That kid became a scientist, maybe an engineer, and designed a
Yeah.
product that is more prevalent on the planet than the toaster. Right. The flip cell phone was envisioned first as a futuristic device on a television show in the 60s and early 70s. And then years later, those thoughts, that imagined product, made its way through a production, development, design, and production process that put that device in the hands of people. That's the power of imagination.
Yeah. Oh, it's so empowering to hear you say that. And there's a sentence that you said once: "Our imagination is a trigger for manifestation," and I love that because
Mhm.
it's so true.
Yeah.
The fact that we have the ability now to think of something and make it reality, it's empowering. And there's so many things where technologists specifically have the ability to just code it up, to build it and to run with it.
It's a remarkable time to be alive. I mean, the 3D printers, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the list goes on and on. I know that there are people working on a way of maximizing the computing power of a chip. I think they call it geosynchronous systems architecture. And with this technology, with a few more iterations and generations of the technology, we will get very close to the holodeck in our lifetime.
Oh, how cool will that be?
How cool. Now, of course, I want to beam everywhere
Yes,
or anywhere, really.
at this rate.
And that's the one, that's the holy grail. And that one is that I believe will take, well, I doubt that I'll be around when that comes, but it's coming. I mean, we're gonna figure it out. That's the ingenuity of the human mind.
Yeah, it reminds me of just virtual reality stuff. Like that's the closest I've gotten to being able to go anywhere. You could be in a virtual reality headset and suddenly you're in Spain or suddenly you're anywhere in the world, even on
Virtual
Mars.
reality, augmented reality, all of these things, the sophistication of AI, of artificial intelligence, all of these things are going to contribute to that technology being built and enjoyed by the consumer.
Yeah, it's so exciting, and it's so great. Well, want to keep moving on because I have so many questions I would love to ask you. But you're all about authenticity, and sometimes it's kind of hard to stay authentic as you're kind of going through the daily grind of getting work done and stuff. But to you, why is authenticity so important today? And what advice do you have for others who are struggling to find or share their voice?
Wow. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question before. Why is authenticity important to me? Well, I can tell you this. I have spent an awful lot of time, effort, and energy in my life trying to determine who I was or who I am.
Mm,
And having made great inroads in that area, I'm loath to give it up to anyone for any reason. I mean, and I don't. It's not that I think that you have to have an authentic voice to be a storyteller. I think it's essential because they say to writers, write what you know, right?
yeah.
Write what you know, and if you have spent the time working on yourself, really engaging in a process of rigorous introspection, right? And have really decided that whatever you see that you want to adjust or that doesn't, it's not necessarily a good look, and getting to the root of why it is we do the things that we do, and developing tools that help us avoid those kinds of patterns in our lives. If you have done that kind of work, then you know who you are. At least you're well on your way to figuring that piece of why we're here out. And if you have done that kind of work, then I'm certain you have an interesting story to tell, because what does a good story have? It has drama, right? It has conflict, and those times in our lives that aren't smooth, those bumps in the road, those moments of conflict, that's where we learn the most about
Mhm.
ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just important; it's essential to have some self-knowledge as a part of your quiver of arrows as a storyteller.
Yeah. The way you said that, it reminds me of a joke actually that a friend of mine often say. We always say whenever we're struggling at work, whenever we're struggling through some downtimes, we think, this might be an excellent conference talk someday. This could be a really good story we can tell to a group of people someday. And it's true because those kinds of things really are such a good learning experience.
Mhm.
And it's something where you can be like, if I can get through it, you can get through it too. And it's so encouraging to so many other people then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we all do it. We all struggle at some time or another. We all go through changes. We all get confused. We all lose our way, right? So there's
Yeah.
no shame in any of it because it's all a part of your story, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And being a part of stories and just trying to make people's voices heard is
Mm.
so important, and trying to be inclusive in every single way. What can we as technologists and leaders and leaders in technology do to create a more inclusive world, a more educated world, a more imaginative world?
Hmm. I think as a society, we've been having this conversation with one another a lot since this past summer.
Yeah.
And I think where I am right now is the need and necessity to, when I'm asked this question or questions like this, to remind folks how important it is to listen
Mhm.
to those who have been marginalized, to those who have been oppressed. More than anything, I think that we all want to be seen. We all want to be validated that we are here and that we matter to someone,
Mhm.
and that we have, that our intrinsic value as a human being is seen or appreciated. And I believe that that's something that we all have in common. And for those who have not been seen or heard or allowed to breathe, it is important to just bear witness to the story.
Mm.
Give
That-
them an opportunity to be seen and
Mhm.
heard. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine today, and he told me a story about how his brother, who was in trouble and out of trouble with the law, when he got out of jail, his brother, he was always afraid because his brother always used his name, right? When he
Oh.
was stopped, he would say, "My name is," and he would use his brother's name. And so my friend was always, whenever his brother was out of jail, he was always afraid of getting picked up because he knew that's what was going to happen. He was going to get stopped and he was going to go to jail. And it dawned on me, I said to him, you really do have the experience of what it is being a Black man in America, because it's the constant fear.
Yeah.
It's always there. You live with it constantly, right? And so
Mhm.
it's not the incidents necessarily that of being stopped by the police, although they can be deadly, and we have seen that clearly. But it's the constant worrying about it, and the need to be mindful that you might encounter someone who does not care about you as a human being and are absolutely fine with taking your life. And that's a reality. That's just a reality. So listen to those stories and lend your support in terms of just allowing them to share their truth.
Yeah, I think social media has kind of been a double-edged sword in that, where there have been plenty of things that haven't gone right because of social media. But on the other hand, it's been powerful because there's so many stories that a lot of people wouldn't normally have seen or
Yeah.
heard because they don't have that kind of exposure to people who are afraid all the
Right,
time.
right. I mean, people have told me time and time again, I grew up in Montana, and, seeing you on Reading Rainbow was my first and only exposure to a person of color. Um, our media sources, because of their ubiquity, can be illuminative and
Yeah,
illustrative. I say all the time, all television, or in this case, all media, is educational. Question is, what are we teaching? Right?
yeah,
So the influence of the media, and we can include social media in that conversation now, is powerful, and we have to be mindful of how powerful it is. But we also have to be mindful that we are being, based on our clicking habits, We are being fed information in an attempt to sell stuff, right? Because your behavior follows you around.
Yeah.
And the ads that you see and the news that you see is in large measure determined and dictated by the profile that you are to these companies, these corporations. So I think at least some of the divide that we all experience in the country right now is due to the misuse of the technology. It's being weaponized against us, and that's never a good thing.
Yeah, I think that just shows how diverse teams lead to diverse products that are for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
We need to really focus on building teams, building experiences that are for everyone, not just to push a product, not just by a team of white dudes who want to get this product made for more white dudes.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have products made for everyone so that everyone can be included and a part of the stories that we consume and tell.
Hollywood is the worst in that regard. The report just came out recently that you would think that this business would be at the forefront of bringing different voices to the table, different perspectives, different points of view. But no, I mean, the percentage of women directors, Black directors, directors of color is abysmal. And like many other sectors of the economy, my industry must do better. It's as simple as that. We have to do it.
Yeah, and I think luckily with voices like yours, where people are speaking up more about it, and it's slowly but surely changing. It feels like. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I guess we'll see in a few years how the trends go.
Well, you know what it feels like to me? It feels different in as much as I was really encouraged this summer when there were so many young people in the street. And that's what felt like to me. It feels to me like we are massing to some sort of critical point, approaching critical mass where these long needed changes are really beginning to be possible. There's still a lot of resistance. You can see it and feel it, but it really does feel like this old way of doing things, this old way of being is beginning to go away. We're certainly not there yet, but the signs are good. The indications are really good that we might be able to make sustained and lasting change with this generation.
Yeah, I love seeing young people get excited about things and passionate about these things. And that is another one of those things where social media and technology is playing such a big part of it. So many of the boycotts and worldwide, completely globally. And there's so many things where they were able to, even though so many young people couldn't vote because of their age, they were still able to organize protests and boycotts and organize rallies and stuff. And it's so exciting to see this kind of energy happen and a wave is coming of change. And it's so cool to see.
Yeah, for me, this generation they have already staked their claim as stakeholders in this society. That what happens to the environment, what happens, to the country, what happens to education, what happens to how much money we devote to war and the machinery of war. They have already decided that this is a world that they're going to inherit, and they feel a certain way about it. And they're going to have their voices heard. And I love and respect that.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Okay. I would love to hear about your book, The Rhino Who Swallowed a Storm. What motivated you to write it?
I love talking about Rhino. What motivated me was another one of those days in America, right? Where someone had gone into a public place with an automatic weapon and killed many people. I think on this particular occasion, it was a movie theater in Colorado. And I was thinking, wow, because these events kept happening, and it was it was tornadoes and floods and fires and mass shootings. And I thought, who is talking to kids about all of these incidents and occurrences? Because if Fred Rogers was here, if Mr. Rogers were here, he would be the one talking in an age appropriate way to the audience of children about how to cope, how to deal with the world that has so many repeated tragedies, right? Mm-hmm. Where we're always experiencing loss, and how do we deal with the losses that we keep experiencing, right? Where do we draw our resilience from? And Fred was gone, and so I really tried to see who else might there be. And at the end of my conversation with myself, I had convinced myself that I should try. I should try and write the book. And that's how it began. But so I began with Fred, and one of his sayings, because Fred always said, "Look for the helpers," right? Mm-hmm. Look for the helpers. And so Rhino is a story about a young rhino whose everything he knew was washed away in a terrible storm, and his response to seeing his whole world destroyed was to actually swallow the storm. And now he's got a problem of how to get the storm out, and it sends him on a quest where he encounters helpers who really help him through this period of adjustment from loss to recovery. And I think it's a story that has value for not just kids, but for all of us, especially these days. We have all, in the past year, experienced a loss of some kind or another, even if it's only the loss of being able to freely travel and see our friends and classmates, right? So we are all really intimately familiar at this point with the idea of loss, and we could all use some support in healing those losses and recovering from them, incorporating them, allowing them to help build who we are without defining who we are, right? Yeah. So you want to incorporate the loss. That's where character comes from, the ability to persevere, right? The ability to get through it and to draw strength from the experience of having gotten through it.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I got to buy that for myself.
Well, you can go to LeVarBurton.com and get your very own copy of Rhino.
Perfect. Well, speaking of that, does cozying up in a comfortable chair with a good book still hold value in 2021 with so many of our content consumptions moving online to streaming and to podcasts and to audiobooks?
It does. It absolutely does. I certainly hope so. I believe it has great value, and I continue to engage in self-care that involves a big comfy chair and something delicious to read. I don't think I will ever surrender that, even if I'm doing it on a tablet. For me, people ask me all the time, tablet reading or a bound book for my kids, and I say, you know what, I don't care. I just want kids to read. Now, there is such a thing as age appropriate where the technology is concerned, and we're all being guinea pigs right now because we're the first generation to have these devices around us in our hands and around our bodies, as often as we do. So but we do know that there's a certain time during the formulation and maturation of a human being where the brain and the brain's plasticity is really fragile. So we don't want to do anything harmful. So we have to be mindful of how much screen time, babies and small children have. However, when we're talking about, having cracked the code and becoming a reader for life, it really doesn't matter to me as long as kids are reading.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a podcast where you still read, right?
I do, yeah. Because I have a podcast because reading aloud is one of my favorite ways of storytelling. you know?
Mhm.
And I love reading aloud, and I love short stories. And I thought, well, if I were going to do a podcast, what would it be? Well, it would be me reading short stories, one in every episode. And so that's what I do on LeVar Burton Reads. I pick a short story, a different one every week, and I read it. I read it, and I introduce it and give you a little background on maybe the author and the story, and then I read the story, and then I do a little sort of postscript at the end, where I talk a little bit about how the story might have impacted me or what it brought up for me, and that's it. We add some some atmospheric sound and light scoring just to locate you um, in the feeling of the story.
Mm.
But it's not a lot of production enhancement at all. It really is very, 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 very sparse. And I love it, and people seem to as well, especially adults now who grew up on Reading Rainbow. For some reason,
Yeah.
they say the sound of my voice is like a Valium or something.
It's kind of true.
I don't
I'm one of those.
exactly know how that works, but I'll have to take their word for it.
Yeah, no, it's very, very true. And you are not the first one to say that, because I have heard that said multiple times, where they're just like, ooh, he has a podcast. I can just listen to this before bed. It's the perfect bedtime story.
There you go.
There you go.
But you know what? I'm not mad at him, because again, during this time, which has been so stressful for all of us, finding ways to engage in self-care has been essential.
Yeah.
Absolutely essential. And if being read a story before bed is what promotes a good full night's sleep for you, I am not mad.
Yeah.
Do that thing. No, really, do that thing. Because nothing is more important than our health, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. I think that if we pay attention to keeping those aspects of ourselves healthy, you can live a long and happy life in the body.
It's so good. Whenever I read before bed, instead of scrolling through Twitter or watching a TV show, I sleep so much better. And it's keeps the story in my head a little bit, so I can dream about it. There's so many things.
Yes, I love going from story to sleep and having elements of that story show up in my dreams.
Yeah.
It's always very cool.
It's always very exciting. So arguably your most famous catchphrase going back to your Reading Rainbow days is, "But you don't have to take my word for it." It's a very simple phrase, but it carries a compelling nugget of truth about the importance of seeking knowledge for ourselves. Yeah. Why do you think that phrase resonates so much with people?
Whew, boy, you're really tossing the hard ones at me today.
I'm sorry.
I mean, I believe it has something to do with exactly what you just said, that it is a caution to take ownership and agency over that which you put your faith and stock in this life. And the idea that you don't have to take anybody's word for it, because you have the wherewithal to pick up a book, take a look, and divine for yourself what your position is, what truth you will align yourself with. If you are literate in at least one language, you are, by my definition, free, at least mentally free, because no one can oppress you based on the idea that they can control you vis-a-vis the information that they feed you. Now, we have been, we've gone through a period now where there has been a lot of debate about what actually is the truth. But I'm not going for the okie doke. There is a truth. There is no such thing as an alternate fact. And gaslighting is real. People who want to control you will tell you what they want you to hear, and dare you to disagree with them. And it is true. Human beings, it's real. sometimes we just feel overwhelmed. Sometimes it's easier to let somebody else do the work, and then you just go along with the crowd. But we have to be discerning people.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have discernment. Discernment is one of my favorite words in language, and the metaphor for discernment is a knife. And I love knives. I collect them because a knife is a weapon or a tool. The most appropriate use is determined by the wielder, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing, but it is the intention of the person with the knife that determines whether it's a weapon or a tool. And I just love the concept that discernment means that you have the ability to figure it out for yourself, to see through the guise, right? To cut through the noise to truth, to the what is.
I love that. And that can be applied to so many things too. That even on the technological front, almost every single time someone says, what's the best way to code this? What's the best way to do that? Good 50% or more of the time, I'm like, you kind of have to be discerning and figure out how you want to do it, because it's so true. You have to learn the pros and cons of everything. You have to figure out what is the truth for you in ways of building things, in ways of understanding things, in ways of interpreting things, everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are in agreement there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one final question for you.
Oh my.
You've had a lot of iconic roles, perhaps none more prolific than your 2-episode run playing yourself on Community.
Yes.
Oh, loved that episode. I definitely watched it again before this because I was myself crying in the bathroom singing Butterfly in the Sky. Where does Donald Glover's Singing Reading Rainbow, that theme song Through Tears on the bathroom floor, where does it rank as you look back on your imprint and legacy in pop culture?
Top 5, no question about it. Top
5.
Top 5. Because for a couple of reasons. One, Donald Glover.
Yes, artist and genius. Yeah.
Enough said. Genius. And two, because it's emblematic of an energy that I got to tell you I encounter all the time. It's exaggerated, right? It's heightened, but that's basically my life. And I'm not going to say I understand it. However, I do love it. I love it because what it says to me, what it reflects back to me is that there's something that I have done that has brought value to their lives, and that they are appreciative of that, even to the point of being tongue-tied or bursting into tears in my presence. I have had both happen, and it happens a lot, and so I embrace it. I do, and the way Donald was just genius at really capturing the essence of that, and showing ourselves to ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, and I really liked your I think it was an improv line where you're just like, oh, more food or something for your
more
roots
fish
character.
for Kunta.
More fish for Kunta. That's what it was.
Yeah,
such a funny line.
My best ad lib in 44 years of showbiz.
Well, perfect. Well, LeVar, I appreciate you. I know everyone listening appreciates you. Thank you so much for your time today and for your great insights.
You were fantastic. I loved our conversation. I look forward to being able to do it again.
Thank you. All right. Have a good one.
You too.